I thought I was just bringing my dog in for a quick checkup, but the second I walked through the clinic doors, something in the air shifted. It wasn't the smell of antiseptic or the faint sound of barking from the back. It was the guy behind the counter, the one who looked up when I walked in, held my eyes just a second too long, then smiled like he knew something I didn't. I smiled back, trying not to overthink it, but the way his gaze lingered had my pulse doing something it usually didn't at the vet's office. My name's Jacob. I'm 28. I work freelance from home, and I've got a 4-year-old golden retriever named Milo who's basically my shadow. He'd had some mild itching lately, and even though it wasn't serious, I wanted to get it checked out before it turned into anything worse. My usual vet, Dr. Carver, had been friendly but clinical, always in and out, no nonsense. But when I gave my name at the front desk, the guy told me, "Dr. Carver's out today. I'll be taking care of Milo." His name tag said Sam. Sam, with messy brown hair, warm eyes that looked like they noticed everything, and rolled-up sleeves that showed just enough forearm to make me think thoughts I wasn't used to thinking in a medical building. He knelt to greet Milo, his voice soft, one hand stroking the top of his head in that gentle, confident way dogs love instantly. "You're a good-looking boy," he said to the dog. But when he looked up at me after that, something in my chest did a full stop and start. I sat in the waiting room pretending to scroll through my phone, but my eyes kept drifting back to the hallway he'd walked down. I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't looking for anything, but there was something about him that made me hyper-aware of every breath I took. When they called me into the exam room, Milo trotted happily in, and Sam was already there, washing his hands at the sink. The room was clean and bright, like every vet clinic I'd ever been to, but it suddenly felt warmer, like the space had shrunk since he stepped inside. "So, mild itching?" he asked, his voice calm, professional, but still carrying that softness from before. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "He's been scratching a bit more than usual. No redness, no cuts, just enough to get me worried." Sam nodded, crouched beside Milo, and began a careful, methodical check of his coat. He talked to the dog the whole time and to me in between, asking the right questions but also smiling in this way that felt like more than just politeness. Every time our eyes met, something held a little longer than it needed to. When his hand brushed mine reaching for the clipboard, it was barely a touch, but it left heat in its place. "You're good with him," I said quietly. He looked up, smiling. "I like dogs. They don't fake it." And I swear there was something in the way he said that, in the way he looked at me after, that made it hard to breathe. We finished the checkup, and Sam confirmed it was just dry skin. Something treatable, nothing serious. "I'll write something up," he said, stepping over to the counter to grab a notepad. Milo curled at my feet like the good boy he was, and I sat there trying to pretend this was just another errand, another task to check off before lunch. But when Sam turned back to hand me the note, our fingers touched again. This time longer. Deliberate. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. And suddenly, the air between us wasn't just warm. It was thick, charged, like we were both waiting to see if one of us was going to step forward or pretend nothing happened. I stepped forward. He didn't stop me. The second I stepped closer, the mood in the room changed. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, magnetic shift that felt impossible to ignore. Sam's hand was still hovering near mine from the note he'd handed me, and neither of us moved to break the contact. We were close enough that I could see the subtle flecks of green in his brown eyes, the way his jaw tensed like he was trying to stay composed. "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked quietly, and it wasn't about Milo anymore. Not really. Sam's lips parted slightly, like he wanted to say something, but instead, he just nodded once. "Yeah," he said, stepping in just a bit more. "I think your dog's not the only one who needs attention." That would have been cheesy if he hadn't said it so calmly, so sure. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't that guy, but something about the room, about the way he looked at me, about the fact that we were still alone in this quiet, brightly lit office while people walked casually past the door. Hey, thanks for watching until this point. Please leave a comment if you're enjoying the video. It really helps us grow the channel and reach more people. And hey, thank you very much. Let's get back to story. It all made the moment feel inevitable. We didn't rush. He moved first, just a slight lean forward, his head tilting like he wanted to test the space between us. And when I didn't back away, when I let my fingers slide lightly up his arm, that was all it took. He kissed me. It was soft at first, warm and questioning, like he wasn't sure how far I'd let it go. But when I leaned into him and pressed my palm to his chest, he deepened it. His hand slid to my waist, gripping gently, and I felt him exhale against my mouth like he'd been holding that breath since I walked in. I kissed him back with everything I wasn't saying, all the surprise, the hunger, the heat that had been quietly building since our eyes first met in the lobby. Our bodies pressed closer, his thigh between mine, our chests brushing with every slow inhale. One of his hands came up to the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair as he angled me closer. I could hear voices just outside the room. A laugh. A clipboard snapping shut. But the door was closed. Not locked. And for some reason, that made it hotter. Sam pulled back just a little, his lips hovering near mine, his breath shallow. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. "More than okay," I said. "You?" He nodded, trying to stay professional. Failing. We both smiled, not joking, not embarrassed, just caught up in something we hadn't planned but didn't want to stop. His lips found my neck next, slower now, more focused, while his hands slid up beneath the back of my shirt. My skin prickled under his touch, his fingers warm and firm, exploring carefully like he was still treating me just in a different way. I let my hands move too, across his back, over the firm lines beneath his fitted shirt. I felt the tension in him, the way he tried to stay composed, but every small groan in my ear told me he was unraveling just like I was. The room felt smaller. Hotter. The scent of disinfectant still lingered, but now it was mixed with the heat of us, the closeness, the quiet gasps and soft kisses exchanged like secrets. He turned me gently, backing me toward the exam table, not breaking contact. My fingers gripped the edge as he leaned into me, his hips against mine, his lips trailing along my jaw and down to my collarbone where my shirt had come slightly undone. I could barely think. But I didn't want to. We moved like we were alone in a world that didn't exist outside this room, two people caught in a moment too charged to stop. And Milo? Still asleep on the floor. Blissfully unaware that his checkup had just become the hottest moment of my year. I don't think either of us knew how far we were going to take it when the kiss started, but by the time Sam had me perched halfway on the edge of the exam table, shirt bunched around my ribs and his hands splayed across my lower back, there was no pretending it was just a momentary lapse in judgment. This wasn't a stolen kiss. This was need. And God, the fact that we were still inside a professional, pristine vet's office where someone could have knocked, where people were walking just beyond the wall, only made it more electric. Sam's lips moved from mine to my neck, trailing down to the hollow of my throat as his breath hitched. Every press of his mouth felt deliberate. Focused. Like he was mapping me with care, not like a casual hookup, but like someone he'd thought about before. Someone he didn't want to forget. "You're insanely distracting," he murmured, between kisses, his voice low and rough. "Pretty sure you're not supposed to say that to a client," I whispered, my fingers tugging his shirt from his waistband. "Good thing I'm just filling in," he said, and his smirk against my skin made me grip the table tighter. He pulled back for a moment, looking at me, really looking at me, and his hand came up to brush my cheek. The soft touch was a contrast to how flushed I felt, to how much I wanted him right now. But it grounded me. And then his forehead rested lightly against mine. "You want to stop?" he asked, quiet but serious. "No," I said, my hand slipping beneath his shirt. "I want this." That was all he needed to hear. We kissed again, deeper, messier, more desperate, and I could feel the way his body responded, the way we moved in sync now, like this was familiar, even though it wasn't. His hands slid under my thighs, lifting me slightly, my legs wrapped around him without hesitation. The cool surface of the table under me only made his warmth more intoxicating. He pressed into me gently, the friction slow but unbearable, and I let out a quiet sound that was swallowed instantly by his mouth. My fingers dug into his shoulders as his hips rolled, the movement subtle but enough to make us both exhale harder. Outside the door, footsteps passed. Closer. Then fading again. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us cared. Sam's hand cradled the back of my neck as his lips hovered just above mine, breath hitched. "You're gonna ruin me," he said, like a confession, like it had weight. "Too late," I replied, kissing him again. We moved together, still half-dressed, still technically in the middle of an office that had no business hosting a moment this charged. But it didn't feel dirty or rushed, it felt like something that had been waiting to happen. And once it started, we couldn't unfeel it. The intensity rose in waves, lips dragging across skin, hands exploring without hesitation, quiet moans swallowed in kisses. He whispered my name once, not as a question, but as a tether, as if speaking it out loud made the moment more real. And when we both finally came down from that wave, breathless, clothes rumpled, foreheads pressed together, the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was tender. Full. We stayed like that for a few minutes, catching our breath, still close, his arms wrapped loosely around me like he wasn't ready to let go. And I didn't want him to. Then, from the floor, a soft thump. Milo, stretching, yawning, tail wagging like he hadn't just slept through the hottest moment of my adult life. I looked at Sam and laughed. He grinned, pressing one last kiss to my cheek. Well, he's definitely fine. But now I might need to be examined. We pulled ourselves back together with quiet coordination, the way two people do when the heat is still lingering in the air but real life is starting to seep back in. Sam smoothed his shirt, brushing invisible wrinkles from the collar while I tried to button mine without laughing. One of the buttons was clearly in the wrong hole and my hands were still shaking just enough to make it frustrating. Sam noticed. "Come here," he said softly, stepping in to fix it for me. His fingers moved easily, his gaze flicking up to mine every few seconds, and there was something so unexpectedly tender about the whole thing that my chest ached. Not from guilt, not from doubt, from something that felt dangerously close to affection. "Thanks," I murmured as he gave the now properly buttoned shirt a final pat. "You'd make a terrible vet tech," he teased. "Zero hand coordination." "Good thing I'm just the anxious dog dad," I said, glancing down at Milo, who was now sitting upright and wagging like he was the one who just had a good time. Sam leaned against the counter, arms crossed, but his expression had softened. "I meant what I said," he added after a beat. "I don't usually do this. Especially not here." "I figured," I said. "You didn't seem like the type who just pulls people onto exam tables." He raised an eyebrow, lips curving. "You saying I'm predictable?" "I'm saying whatever that was, it didn't feel casual." His smile faltered just slightly, not in a bad way. Just like he was relieved to hear it. "No," he agreed. "It didn't." The air shifted again, not spicy this time, but open. Honest. And it felt just as intense in a different way. Outside the exam room, the sound of footsteps picked up. A knock came lightly on the door. "Sam? You good in there?" He stepped away from me quickly, voice steady. "Yeah, just finishing up. Coming out now." The footsteps retreated and Sam turned back toward me, grabbing a small bottle from the counter and scribbling something on a sticky note. "Moisturizing rinse," he said, handing it to me. "For Milo. Nothing prescription. You'll just mix this in with his bath once a week." I took it, fingers brushing his again, just briefly. Just enough to spark that small flicker again. "You'll probably see Dr. Carver next time," Sam added, almost hesitating. "But I wouldn't mind seeing you again. Outside of all this." I nodded slowly, heart thudding. "I'd like that." We walked out together, trying to look casual. I booked a follow-up just to have an excuse, and he gave me a receipt like it was any other day, except I could still feel his eyes on me as I walked out the front door, Milo happily trotting at my side. Outside, the air was bright and cool, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, processing everything. The kiss. The heat. The way his voice dropped when he said my name. The way I didn't want that to be the last time. My phone buzzed just as I reached the corner. New message, unknown number. "Sam, hey. Just checking if Milo's still fine. Or if you're the one who needs a follow-up." I stared at it, smiling like an idiot. "Me, Milo's great. But I wouldn't mind getting examined again." A few seconds passed. "Sam, Friday night? Let's pretend we met somewhere less weird." Friday came faster than I expected. I must have checked the mirror 5 times before leaving my apartment, telling myself this was just a casual dinner, not a first date with the guy who'd had his hands on me in a vet's office 4 days earlier. But the way I kept fixing my shirt and running my hands through my hair said otherwise. Sam texted me the name of a little wine bar tucked into a quiet corner of town. It was dimly lit, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, and looked nothing like a place that would host a guy who could make you lose your mind beside an exam table. But there he was, already seated near the back, nursing a glass of red and wearing a dark green sweater that made his eyes stand out even more than I remembered. When he saw me, he stood quickly, like it was instinct. "Hey," he said, and for a second I forgot how to speak. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "I almost brought Milo, but I figured you'd charge me extra." He laughed, full and easy, and whatever tension had built in my chest loosened. "I already miss him," he said. "But I'm glad it's just you tonight." The conversation flowed easier than I thought it would. We talked about work, about the odd things people ask vets and freelancers, about the weather and how the city always smelled like roasted chestnuts this time of year. But underneath it all, I could feel it, that quiet pull. The awareness. The memory of what his hands felt like on my skin and the way he'd whispered my name like it meant something more than just a client. After the second glass of wine, he leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "I've been thinking about you all week," he said. "Trying to figure out how something so unexpected could feel so right." I swallowed hard, watching the way his fingers played with the stem of his glass. "I've been thinking about you too," I admitted. "And I don't usually do this either, for the record." He smiled, and it was softer this time. Like something in him had just settled. We didn't rush to leave, but when we did, it was like we already knew what would happen next. We walked to his place, just a few blocks away, shoulders brushing, hands not quite touching but never far. When we reached his front steps, he paused, then looked at me with that same focused expression from the clinic, like he was studying me through a lens no one else could see. "You coming in?" he asked, even though we both already knew the answer. His apartment was quiet and warm, lit only by a single lamp in the corner and the glow from the city outside the window. As soon as the door clicked shut behind us, we were on each other again, slower this time, more deliberate. His kisses were deeper, more certain, like he wasn't afraid to let me feel everything behind them. We moved together like we'd already learned each other's rhythms. Our clothes came off in pieces, tossed gently aside between kisses, and soon we were wrapped in each other completely. Skin to skin, chest to chest, every touch more intimate than the last. He took his time. So did I. There were more whispered names. More quiet laughter between gasps. Hands tangled in hair. Lips pressed to necks. There was no rush, just two people exploring something that felt like it had been waiting to be discovered for years. Later, when we lay tangled on his bed, breath slowing, fingers tracing idle patterns along each other's arms, he turned his head toward me. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing," he said. I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. "Then don't let it be." The morning light filtered through Sam's bedroom window like it had every day before, soft and golden, lazily stretching across the sheets and landing on the quiet rise and fall of his chest. I lay there beside him, still half tangled in the warmth of the night before, my head resting against his shoulder, fingers tracing slow lines across his bare skin. His breathing was steady. His arms still rested lightly across my waist like he hadn't even considered letting go while he slept. And maybe that's what made me stay so still, afraid to move and lose that weight, that comfort, that silent permission to stay. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up wondering what came next. I just knew I didn't want to leave. He stirred after a few minutes, eyes blinking open with the slow confusion of waking beside someone new, but then he saw me and the corner of his mouth pulled into the kind of smile that told me he wasn't confused at all. "You're still here," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. I smiled back. I figured Milo wouldn't forgive me if I came home smelling like someone else's breakfast. He chuckled softly and pulled me closer, pressing a lazy kiss to my temple. "Well, I only had kibble planned. Hope you're not picky." We stayed in bed for a while longer, just talking, not about what had happened, but about everything else. I told him about my worst clients, he told me about his weirdest patients. We traded stories between soft touches and slow kisses. No rush. No labels. Just us. Eventually, we got up, wandered into his kitchen, and made coffee in our underwear like we'd done it 100 times before. It felt domestic in the most unexpected way. I stood barefoot near the sink, watching the steam curl from his mug as he leaned against the counter, grinning like he couldn't quite believe I was still there. "I don't usually do this," I said finally. "I mean, I never do this." He nodded, reaching out to run his fingers along my forearm. "I know. Neither do I. I want to keep seeing you." His eyes met mine, not surprised, but relieved. Like he'd been hoping I'd say that but didn't want to be the first to push. "I want that too," he said. "Not just this. All of it." Something clicked into place, not a thunderclap, not a firework. Just something quiet and certain. The way your heart feels when something fits. When you stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and realize you've been barefoot next to someone who's already walking beside you. A few days later, I walked into the clinic again. No appointment. Just an excuse. Milo trotted in, tail wagging, and the receptionist gave me a friendly smile as I signed in. She didn't know that I wasn't there for flea meds, that I wasn't there because Milo had a scratch. She didn't know that I had butterflies in my stomach and a number in my phone I'd been texting every night. Sam appeared in the hallway, clipboard in hand, his face doing that thing it always did when he saw me, a slight raise of the eyebrows, the smile that only showed on the left side first, like he was trying to stay cool and failing at it entirely. "Jacob," he said. "You again. You look surprised," I teased. "I was hoping you'd come back." He led me into the exam room, and this time everything was different. Not because of what happened last time, but because now the air between us was settled. Steady. We laughed. We flirted. We kissed just once, quickly, when the door was shut. Milo, again, blissfully unaware that his vet had completely stolen my attention. "I guess we made the follow-up official," Sam said, brushing his fingers over my knuckles. "I think we skipped a few steps," I replied. "But I'm okay with that." Outside the clinic, the world kept spinning, people walking dogs, coffee shops opening, the city humming like it always had. But I didn't rush back to my apartment. I walked with Sam for a few blocks. He held Milo's leash. I held his hand. And maybe that's how I knew that this story wasn't going to end with a hookup or a hot memory or a clever message on a sticky note. It was going to be a slow burn in the best way. And this time I didn't need a checkup to know I was in good hands.